It's my pleasure today to share some of the great work that's been happening, but remember that our strategic plan mid-year review is also about beginning to seek feedback from the board about things that you might want to see differently in the coming year. It's also important to know that when we developed our strategic plan, it went from 2019 to 2022. Do we want to build on what we have or start over? With the understanding that we're going to have, an election in November of 2022 is just something that we might want to talk about and consider over the course of the next couple of months. I also wanted to share that we will talk about both highlights and successes as well as some current challenges that we've been facing, because we're always going to be honest and transparent about that. And our goal always when we meet together as a team and our staff takes is to problem solve. What is the data telling us, and what is it that we want to do just slightly differently in order to make sure that we're moving forward? And then finally, I would just share that we've had some great focus group conversations over the course of the last couple of months with members of the community, with our teachers, with our support staff, with our seniors. I always collect those notes and then bring that information back to you as we think about strategic planning moving forward. So starting with goal 1, academic success is our fundamental mission. So that's always where we begin. But we know that we don't achieve success in goal 1 without the support and the cohesion with the other 4 goals in our plan as well. So we've talked about a high-quality standards-based curriculum that is consistent across grade levels. We talked about this year moving from Read, Write, Talk, and Solve to Wicker as a part of our AVID implementation strategy. We know these high-leverage standards-based activities are important for engaging kids in deep learning. We're talking about intentional strategies to support subgroups and work to close achievement gaps, acceleration for all students, as well as then a real strong focus on high-quality standards-based math curriculum and instruction, because we know that's where the gaps from the pandemic have been most impacted. And board members, please do interrupt me if you like as we move forward if you have questions. So starting with strategy 1A, ensuring every student receives a high-quality standards-based curriculum that's consistent across grade levels and courses throughout the district. I'm super excited with the progress that we're showing in this particular area. You can see that 92% of our teachers are using our adopted curriculum and following our curriculum unit plans, and 89% are using the curriculum along with these district-adopted CUPS-aligned materials for our student learning. This is super important. Yes, sir.
Do you have a printed version of this that we can take notes on while we're here?
I did not bring a printed version. I'm sure that we can get one. Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. We're always torn between, are we trying to move more paperless and we're not. All right, so again, going back to this particular piece, we've seen a great growth in our teachers' use of the standard adopted materials. In terms of our mid-year performance in ELA, we are seeing growth at all grade levels, kindergarten and 10th, not as much as we want to see. We are seeing strong growth in kindergarten, 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade in ELA. In math, we are also seeing growth across the subject areas, K through 10, K through 12 actually. The most significant growth has been with our high school algebra, geometry, and liberal arts math teachers. This is important because these are our students that are meeting graduation requirements through either the Algebra 1 or the Geometry 1 EOC, and it's also where our proficiency levels have typically been well below what we want them to be. In terms of 1B, we are also seeing exciting adoption of the Wicker strategies and the impact of AVID on student engagement with our students. We know that these are high leverage activities that require kids to think more deeply, collaborate with each other, develop organization skills that will help them with life as well as with learning, and we're seeing increases across the board in those particular pieces. I'm also excited to say that our green shirts, the additional staff that we added as a part of our one-to-one implementation plan through the ESSER dollars are having a strong impact in our schools. A green shirt is at every school at least once a week to coach, model, and support engagement of the students in the technology with their one-to-one devices to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck with that investment. In addition, I was recently at Poinciana High School on January 20th for their AVID showcase. We had visitors from across the district and also from several other districts in the state. who came to observe their Avid implementation in action. And Mr. Schwartz and the team have done a great job of really leading a strong school-wide implementation of Avid, so that yes, the students in the Avid elective are engaging in Avid strategies and benefiting from those, but actually students across the school are experiencing some of these high-yield strategies and deeper levels of learning. We visited classrooms, had an informational session, and we heard from students who talked about how they really do see that A, they have stronger relationships with their teachers as a result of Avid. B, they're developing their sense of self-confidence through the peer tutoring pieces that you have in an Avid elective classroom, and also that they're seeing an impact to their peers outside of the Avid elective in terms of how they organize their studies and engage in learning.
Dr. Reese, if I may, please, how are the green shirts supporting students? Are they doing like workshops to help them understand how to use technology?
They're supporting the teachers
teachers.
so that the teachers can help the students.
Okay, so
It's more of a coaching and modeling with teachers
okay.
to support the engagement of the students. We have, however, provided a lot of information on our website through videos and tutorials for the green shirts that students and parents can access about their devices.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to 1C, our work with our MTSS process and attempts to close the achievement gap. We're having monthly MTSS chat and choose with our MTSS coaches from all of the schools to really look at that progression, referral process, and work toward getting consistency across the district in this important intervention model. Our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, these are for our students who are performing below grade level in our schools, have interventions coded in focus so that those can be carefully monitored. They've been updated to reflect current resources and research-based interventions to build a common language, as well as to understand which interventions are most appropriate based on the student's needs. And we're developing an MTSS resource guide to be used as a reference. The most important thing is too, our REAB team has been having MTSS audits with each individual school to look at the students who are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 who aren't moving. So if this student has been in Tier 2 using Success Maker, for example, as this intervention for 6 weeks or 8 weeks and hasn't improved in terms of their data, then perhaps we need to look at a different intervention to make sure that the students have every opportunity to make that critical growth. The MTSS focus documentation tabs are integrated for behavior and academics, and we're also studying attendance in this particular piece. And then in the last week, we've had deep dive data chats with every school to really help them dig into their data and identify their lowest quartile, their Tier 2 and 3 students, their bubble students, and to develop a plan of support. We talked about that today in our principal meetings, about now that you have the data, what are you going to do about it? Because that's the most important aspect of this particular work.
Dr. Pace,
Yes, ma'am.
if I may, with regards to the interventions, and you may talk about this later in one of our other strategic goals, but how are we engaging parents with those specific students and helping them with strategies to help those students at home?
There is communication that goes home with the NWEA reports that shows how the students did it mid-year, and then they are making individual calls and working on conferences and those types of things to say these are some things that you can do with your students at home.
Okay, so it's just like sending something home, we're not checking to make sure that the parent understands or has received the communication or seen it?
We're trying, my kids in that Tier 2 and Tier 3, but what they're trying to do is to wrap around services so that our guidance counselors, our school social workers, our MTSS coach, that whole leadership team is kind of wrapping around to say, how do we engage with this family on this particular need?
Thank you. And one more thing with regards to the data analysis, I think I have asked you this question before, but I forget a lot of things. How are we teaching or coaching, or do we have a strategy for coaching data analytics? And basically what I'm getting to is we have a lot of data. I'm not sure that data analytics is something that is taught perhaps for our teachers. So I'm wondering how we're helping them to understand the data and tell their stories based on what they see, not, what they think they see.
No, that's the work that's happening in our professional learning communities. It starts with our research and accountability team, Dr. Leah Torres, Ashley Peters, Nathan Maddox, and that whole group. Really helping our principals and assistant principals and coaches dig into the data, and then how they can help them have that conversation with their individual teachers in the classroom. For example, this morning, Will Hennessy, the principal at Eastlake, said he just set aside a day and sat with each teacher and looked at their individual data based on the work that he had gotten done with Leah's group to say, okay, this is where your students are now. It can seem somewhat overwhelming because they're not where you want them to be. But look at these 3 students. What could we do to move those 3 bubble students that are right on the edge and then help to bring everybody else up at the same time? But really being very targeted and intentional at looking at that data to make sure that it is being used well. And again, that was my conversation with the principals today. All of this data can sometimes be overwhelming. I will tell you, I'm envious almost, because as a principal, back in the day, we had a notebook with spreadsheets and pencils and, charts and who was in survey 2 and who was in survey 3 and who's making growth and who's not. And now we're able to do all of that with Power BI and the support of our REA team. So it's really, really powerful, but only as powerful as it's used, right? So that's what we're working to try to make sure they're doing that. The assistant superintendents, the directors, it's really all hands on deck in terms of supporting that effort. And our schools that haven't made the growth yet that we wanted to see based on mid-year performance, a member of the T&L team is going to adopt that school and be there on a weekly basis, doing anything and everything that principal needs us to do, whether it's cover a class, handle a transition, meet with a student or a parent or a group of them, meet with the PLC, just really trying to be all hands on deck.
Perfect, and this is really for the board as we think about whether or not we want to add to our current plan, leave it the way it is, or just extend it. One of the things that I think is important for us to think about is data analytics and maybe having a goal or even a strategy around that to kind of help everybody's skill set come up to date. So just something I would like to see. I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels about that. Thank you, Dr. Pace. Mr. Melendez?
Yeah, as a continuation to that too, I'm a football fan and they have all these analytics now. And one of my teams has a new coach and they actually spoke about that. And they said, hey, are we gonna hire a data analytics person? Because even though they have specific coaches for the running backs and the whatever, they want somebody just to kind of look at the data and figure out how we optimize our players, from their weight, what weight should they be at? And then you change the nutritional program. So just having somebody just focus on filtering the data into something that's easier to digest from the folks.
That is really the role of the MTSS coach in our Title I schools in terms of digging through the data and then having those conversations about those individual kids. I also was at Neptune Elementary School, I think 2 weeks ago, and got to sit in on their MTSS leadership meeting. And she had gone through the data and identified, I think there were like 3 kids who had been in Tier 2 or Tier 3 and weren't moving with the interventions, and what did we need to do about it? And it involved the math coach, the literacy coach, the school social worker, and the school psychologist. And the school psychologist, as she looked at the data and heard their discussion, kind of said, I'm wondering if this student perhaps is dyslexic. Let's talk to the parent, look at some additional testing, and see if we want to do a consent for evaluation, because based on the types of deficits that the student was demonstrating, she recognized from her training, which is far more sophisticated than I've had, and her specialty, that might be a challenge that we want to look at. So that's how deep those conversations are really starting to go school by school.
And my other items, I'll just continue on what she was saying, is I know we talked about during the pandemic, there was the ghost students or something like that weren't showing up. And I know that truancy is an issue pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Truancy is always going to be an issue. Are we able to incorporate that into the strategic plan, or is truancy already there to figure out what are the measures that we're doing to help minimize that? Because if the student's not in school, no matter what we do, they can't learn. And part of that is not necessarily negative. I mean, it's negative no matter what, but I'm talking about, like, sometimes a truancy could be because of the school buses. Someone arriving an hour late. So, because when I think of truancy, I don't just think of absences. I think of tardies of like an hour or more. So, collecting that data too, of, you know, what is the student enrollment data as far as attending, or attendance, not enrollment data, attendance data, as far as how many days are they missing versus how many they total out, and what is the reason why they're missing? Is it missing because parents aren't bringing them to school, or whatever the case may be?
Well, as a part of Goal 5 in our strategic plan, our school safety goal, that is 5A. Really addressing that attendance issue, and we've invested our CARES dollars, some of them, in 14 additional attendance assistants, and I can share some of that information with you, who are really targeting that effort on a more comprehensive basis. We are still seeing challenges. Some of the principals talked with me about that this morning in elementary school, in particular with truancy, among some of our fit kids who have been moving from place to place. And then there's that transition before they get started back in school and transportation arranged and all of those types of things. And we have a new judge, if I'm not mistaken, that we're still building a relationship with as far as it goes with truancy issues, but we're gonna work with that with Mr. Kuppenbacher. That is such an important piece of the puzzle. Mr. Thorne is also working with the team. We've identified a new code that we've already implemented for a late bus. So that we'll be able to track the data more effectively, because we didn't really have any means of doing that other than pulling the GPS routes from every bus every week. And so that wasn't really helpful. So I think this is gonna really help us for when those kids are late just due to the bus, so that we can at least capture the significance of that.
Mr. Arguello, what are you saying?
I'm done.
Mr. Arguello?
Yeah, first, maybe we can get someone to print one out. Missing a couple slides here, Mr. Fly. I don't know if you didn't like 1C, but I'm missing 1C.
That one we had to add today. Sorry about that. Sorry.
But I like to take notes because also we went on to 1C and I still had notes to take and whatever, so maybe we can get someone to print one out.
Absolutely.
The other thing is I'm not sure that the teachers would really love to be told what weight they should be at, and I'm not speaking literally, I'm speaking figuratively. I think taking teacher intuition out of the classroom puts us in a very precarious situation where you have one person or a few people deciding how we're gonna react to thousands of students throughout the district. And in the end, my opinion is that no one knows better than the teachers where these students are at, right? You don't need a lot of charts to know that your kid just failed a math test because he didn't know what 2 + 2 was. So no matter, and I'm a big believer in analytics and in data, but intuition, you know, I think, especially in the classroom, we need to make sure that we're preserving the fact that the teacher is the leader in terms of what they're teaching in the classroom, because they're the ones that understand the students the best, right? Regardless of whatever else is going on, and regardless of what the data tells you, if you had to choose one or the other, obviously the teacher would know best. So,
Absolutely, Mr. Arguello, I don't disagree with you, and we certainly include the teacher in those important NTSS conversations about individual students, as well as within their professional learning communities. That's where we're really getting their insight, and the teacher definitely knows best about the why. What's going on and why is the student not performing at a high level? The data that we're using is nationally normed, NWEA and well vetted, so that we're able to compare our student growth across the country with other students. Certainly there are unique differences, but there also is, in the end, an accountability measure. But the purpose of the data is not to place judgment or to put in additional pressure necessarily on folks, but the truth is, we will own school grades and district grades for the next 2 years under the current model, and we want to make sure that we've given every child their chance to be successful, because that child doesn't have an opportunity to be in kindergarten again this year, or in 3rd grade again this year. And if they're not successful in 3rd grade and achieving proficiency in the reading, there are long-term consequences that measure out all the way to high school graduation and beyond. So we want to do everything that we can now to know where our kids are and work together as teams on how we want to try to support their learning. So would you like to move back to 1C, Mr. Arguello?
No, let's just keep going, but I want to take notes for sure.
Okay. Do you need a pad of paper?
No, I want to be able to take notes regarding the specific bullet items.
Okay. That will be coming. All right, 1B and 1C should be the only slide that's missing. That was the only edit we had to make. Ensuring acceleration opportunities for all students. We are putting into place a district-wide Khan Academy plan. We've had a plan to encourage Khan Academy's usage to help them build their college and career readiness scores, improve their SAT, their PSAT, as well as then potentially achieve a concordance score for graduation. We know that about 20 hours on Khan Academy translates to between 60 to 70 points of growth in both the reading portion and the math portion of the SAT. But we currently have not had any opportunity to track student usage due to the fact that we were using the free plan. The College Board has put into place a plan that will allow us to track student usage, and that is something that we're looking at implementing as we move forward. We do have our Zello implementation, K through 12 now. This is our college and career readiness software preparation piece. It starts with interest surveys, an opportunity for students to identify career paths that they're interested in. It will match them with what are the skills that you need to be successful in that particular career path, what are options in that career path for advancement, employment, from to scholarship opportunities, the FAFSA forms, all of that kind of stuff is really banked in Zello. There are lessons developed for students to use by Mr. Anthony Cook. He's our expert in this particular area. He is, if you aren't following on Instagram, I encourage you to do so, Friendly CCC, our Friendly College and Career Coordinator. He is putting out information on a regular basis about everything college and career ready that we can possibly have, including our upcoming HBCU virtual college and career fair. Our college acceptances so far are already tracking ahead of where we were in 2020-21, almost double in that regard. The FAFSA completions, that is the federal aid financial form that you have to start with to be eligible for any type of scholarship, including Bright Futures, the foundation scholarships, those types of things, have also increased already from 2020-21, and it's January. Our CTE team has developed a one-page summary of our career pathways, basically giving us an ROI. What's the return on the investment in this particular program in terms of meeting labor workforce needs, earnings capabilities, those types of things. And then they continue to expand partnerships with our hospitality, medical, manufacturing, finance, and government agencies to help continue to create workforce opportunities and to develop a comprehensive plan to add additional career academies so that each high school will have at least one over the next 3-year period. We have obviously worked with our adults in the community through our partnership with Osceola County to do some of the short-term rapid credentialing programs. We are also looking at increasing our pipeline efforts. And just last week, we had the opportunity of hosting Frederick Tomey. He is the Ford Global President of their Customer Service Division. He and his team came in from Detroit. They spent a half a day at Neo City Academy, and then they spent lunch and a visit tour at OTEC to look at ways that they could potentially partner with us to increase internship, apprenticeship opportunities in the field of automotive tech, IT, and also cybersecurity. So it was a really productive meeting, lots of good conversation and excitement. He included dealerships, 3 local dealerships, in our conversation for lunch, and really tapped on them to say, hey, would you consider sponsoring at least 3 students in the automotive technician field from the Osceola County School District. It's something that he wants to build on across the country. And the old image of the automotive tech, the grease monkey, for example, is very different today than it was in the past, because now that automotive tech, particularly your master automotive tech, spends all day on a computer looking at how you work on today's cars.
Dr. Grace, we have a couple of questions. Mr. Mullins, do you mind
Yes.
if I go first? Just have, otherwise I'll forget. Thank you for providing this information. I think we are building some great partnerships, and I appreciate that we're doing that, especially with local business owners. I do have a question about the college acceptances. So awesome. I'm glad that we've increased. My question with regards to that is, we have the number of how many have been accepted. Do we know how many have attempted, and what that number is? People who have, or students who have not been accepted.
I do not know that number. I will see if I can get that information from Mr. Cook. Keep in mind too that, for example, the Florida schools, FSU and UF, don't release their acceptances until the end of February typically.
Okay.
And then many of your other Ivy League programs, unless it's through something like the Questbridge Scholarship Program, also come a little bit later in March and April, but certainly we'll try to see if we can get that information. And what we're also trying to do through our college and career counselors and also the Valencia job coaches is to say, okay, so maybe you didn't get into your dream school, FAU for example, have you considered starting at Valencia? And they will help them with the FAFSA form, they will help them with the college application process, and we're trying to do some more hand-holding between I apply at Valencia and I actually register for classes and walk through the door at Valencia in partnership with our Valencia College and our folks in our college and career counseling offices. We did see a drop. The hard data is not out yet because college actual admissions lab data is lab data. It always lags 2 years before what's reported. But we know that enrollment at Valencia, which is where a lot of our students go to start out of high school, was significantly down in 2020 and even through the fall of 2021, although it's coming up. We believe a lot of that was to the fact that we transitioned to digital for that last part of 2020. So we didn't have the outreach that we would have had if the kids were on our campuses with us, celebrating college going week and those types of things. I think it also goes back to the fact that our unemployment rate was so high. For that 5-month period of time, we were the highest in the state, one of the highest in the countries. And there was a lot of stress on families, on students in terms of financial need, and college just did not seem even like a remote possibility. So when we talk about graduation rate, I'll share some additional data on that particular piece.
Yeah, and so this number is not self-reported. This is the colleges reporting back to the district.
This is self-reported. This is what our students bring to
So
us,
students
their
have-
letter, and say, Tanya, my college and career counselor, I'm so excited. I got this letter today in the mail, and then we record that in Zello.
I understand. Okay. All right. I guess what I'm getting to is I would like to know what is the number of students who did not make the cut. Those are students that have the desire to continue their education, and then what was that threshold? That's really what I'm getting to with the question. Thank you, Mr. Melendez.
Yeah, before I get to my question, finishing up what you're saying, I know what happened at Valencia as well that contributed was they went all digital. Not just us, they went digital. A lot of students didn't want to go to college just to go digital. They were like waiting until the campus opened up to physically go back. So I don't know how much that is going to be impacting. Because I have an older stepson that did the same thing too. It was like, oh, I don't want to go all digital. I'll take 1 or 2 classes, but not the entire curriculum.
And even for the fall, they have been slow to come back to full-time face-to-face instruction. They have kept classes small and has continued to do a lot of digital work.
Right. So just something to consider when we think about that as a measure of our performance to the standard. CT's doing phenomenal. I can tell you right now, just from the Aerospace Academy to the Business Academy down in Poinciana, I'm really impressed by them. One thing I would like to see measured, because it does say expanded partnerships, I do want to see more internships and that actually measured. Because I know that we had the Hispanic Business Council here last week in the focus group, and everyone kept talking about how companies can work with our students. It's not just partnering with them, it's getting students real world experience. So if we can track that too and say, okay, these are the number of interns that were placed, this year, because they may not lead to a full-time job, but at least it exposes them to that field. And I would like to be able to see that as a number tracked every year. Hey, these are the number of interns that we have year by year, maybe by different component or whatever. I just think
that has been
internships
a
are
really
important.
hard nut to crack in terms of getting our companies to really embrace that concept. Our construction industry contractors have been the best about it through the ACE program that Mr. Clinch is a part of, where they do mentoring and also provide job opportunities in the summer for some students. It's small, but we're looking to try to grow that. We were ready to sign on the dotted line with one of our local Ford partners that will remain unnamed when all of a sudden they kind of backed away. So that's why having Mr. Tony in town last week to say, hey, we want you to support these. We have a responsibility to start trying to grow some of our own was super, super helpful and valuable. But it is something that Tim and Jeff are working on. And once we have numbers to report, we'll certainly make sure we monitor that.
Excuse me, Mr. Melendez. Do you have you had any conversation with those potential business partners as to why they are not more open to internships?
That investment in building their workforce, they just haven't opened the door yet, but we're working on it.
my biggest thing is if we're not tracking it, then we can't really tell, you know what I mean? Cause, you know, if we see the numbers lower than usual, then like to what Ms. Castillo said, is maybe we can do a deeper dive. But if I don't know how we're doing
Right.
year to year,
It's just
just like how
growing.
we place college graduates,
Right.
I think vocational school is just as important. So we should track like the number of interns that are every year.
Like I said, we're just really growing the program as we move.
Mr. Arguello?
Yes, Dr. Pace, so Zello has a competitive company, I guess a competitor that is paid for by the state. And I think that the majority of districts in the state use the competitor because it's free, it's already funded. So why are we paying Zello as opposed to using the free service?
We had counselors pilot and look at, we had used My Career Shines for our K-8 program for some time, and then at the last minute, I believe 2 years ago, we found out that we were gonna be asked to pay for it, and they then since backed away from that. My Career Shines has 3 career inventories, match and search careers, a search colleges piece, an educational pathways search, a finance 101 series, and goal setting. It is offered in multiple languages, and it just was, the K-5 piece was just launched. They also had counselors look at Naviance, which we used up until this last year, when we implemented Zello first at the 6 through 12 level, and then this year expanded it. And then there was just a multitude of other advantages that Zello offered that the counselors felt like our students would find more valuable. It has an eDocs piece, an alumni tracker, scholarship database, video archives, a resume builder, college matching search, matching search for careers, finance resources, goal setting, built-in grade level scope and sequence and curriculum, a course planter, a parent share option. It also is offered in multiple options, new languages, and has a storyboard piece. So that's, the counselors kind of went through it with Mr. Cook, and that's why we recommended going with Zello. But I have additional information, or Mr. Cook would be happy to sit down and share the comparison of those 3 programs with you.
I think a lot of the things that you mentioned, I remember being they ran a demo through me, and I remember it being the same, or very similar, and having a lot of the features that you just mentioned. So do you know what the cost difference is?
Yes. My Career Shines was gonna be $69,000, and Zello is $163. $143 after year 1, once we get the implementation going.
I bet actually now we know that the My Career Shines, I couldn't even remember the name of the company though, but it's free actually. It's funded by the state.
It's still free. I know that they were going to charge, then they weren't gonna charge, and I think it is free now. But like I said, the counselors felt like Zello had enough advantages for our students, particularly because acceleration has been a focus in the strategic plan, that it was worth the investment.
Okay, and for the 3rd and 4th bullet, how do we know, or do we know what percentages these numbers are increased by the increase in population?
We didn't compare it to increase in our senior class this year, but I certainly can have Mr. Cook do that. I do know that our senior class is not doubled in size.
Regarding the 3rd bullet?
Correct.
All set? Yes? Okay, thank you.
And then going on to 1E, this is the work that we're doing in math. It's exciting to see that we are seeing, based on our NUS data of classroom observations, an increase in inquiry and collaboration. 2 of our worker strategies in the math classrooms. We know that having kids think more deeply about math is a critical avenue to success, especially as we're going to be moving to the new BEST standards, but also because just the application element of the FSA and Algebra 1 EOC. We have a district implementation team for the BEST standards. So we've already completed the first 2 modules of implementation professional learning. And this summer, the district will be hosting a statewide BEST standards conference. I had the opportunity to meet the statewide math supervisor last week when she was here for the board visit. So she's super excited about that. We have done training for the Osceola Numeracy project. We're doing a lot of work with the Carnegie Learning Coach Series. We've had good success with that in the past. We've been providing quarterly content review sessions for our coaches for each grade level in math, K through Algebra 1. We provided additional Carnegie Learning coach support at our targeted schools, and we have now narrowed the recommendation for the upcoming math instructional materials adoption. And Ms. Jurgens, our math coordinator, will be reviewing that process and also the choices with our curriculum review committee at their next meeting.
Are we short math instructors?
We are.
We're still partnering with Valencia though, right?
We are. We have math instructors from Valencia in each of our high schools to help with our college and career, their college, math for college readiness courses, and then it goes from there.
What about partnering with other universities, UCF, Rollins? What's the business case for not?
We haven't explored that, but we certainly can.
Okay.
Any other questions about goal 1? That brings us to goal 2, which addresses Mr. Melendez's question.
Okay, I guess.
We know we can't achieve goal 1, academic success, with the right people in our classrooms and our schools each and every day. So we remain committed to trying to decrease employee vacancies. Are we having great success? No, but we are right up there with everybody else and kind of doing the best that we can. But we're continuing to try to be very, very creative in this process of both recruiting people, developing people, and having to retain these folks. This is this year's instructional hires so far in terms of ethnic diversity. I know that is something that we have talked about. We want our students to see role models in our classrooms that reflect their culture. We have moved a lot, as you can see, from in fiscal year 17, predominantly white hiring at 60% to now moving to almost 50% in fiscal year 22, increasing our ethnicity coverage and representation in our schools. This shows that data in another way, just specifically looking at our white, other than white, and ethnicity and Hispanic population, which we continue to increase, up from 32% in 17 to almost 37% in 2022. We're continuing to try to work on this. This is important because this, number one, reflects what our students see in our classroom, but this is also where our administrative ranks come from, because we work really, really hard to try to grow from within. We have hired 736 teachers this year so far, instructional staff. That includes coaches, guidance counselors, media specialists, those types of things. That is up from 573 in fiscal year 17. So you can see that we are continuing to try to hire and recruit people. I would love to say that all 736 are still with us, but we continue to see a significant portion, about half of them, coming from the alternative certification route. And sometimes they get into the classroom and it's very, very different from what they expected. I'll share some information about our mentoring program in a few minutes that I think you'll find helpful.
Dr. Pace, may I ask, and I apologize for interrupting. With regards to, it sounds like, and Tammy, help me if, or both of you, because you know this information intimately as well, help me make sure that I understand this correctly. It sounds like we are hiring half of our instructional staff from the alternative path, which means they didn't go to school to become teachers, they have a certification, correct? But it also sounds like that is the critical mass, that is the mass that is leaving the profession sooner. Would that be a correct assessment? If we're tracking
Yes.
attrition, would that be the cohort that leaves that leaves soonest, or that leaves with bigger numbers? Is that a correct assessment?
I don't have specific numbers to share with you. We can certainly check that particular data, but from a gut perspective, I would say the answer is yes.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I want to talk with the board about our mentoring program, because it is showing success.
Yes.
And I also will share with you a little bit of work that our professional learning team has done with the alternative certification support mechanism that is making a difference. But we also talked today a lot about culture with our schools, because they've got to help us support these new folks as they're coming into the classroom.
Yeah, I like the mentoring program. I think it's important to have. Any organization knows that that's a way to kind of wrap around. We wrap around our students, we can wrap around our teachers as well. But my question is going more towards expectations before they even come into the classroom, so those interviewing questions that we're asking them. I wonder if that is something that we can look at. I'm asking this from someone who works in talent management, and this is something that we have struggled with as well in my current role. We get people who don't understand what the job is, and they're like, oh, no, just kidding, and then they're leaving at that 30-day mark, whatever. So I'm wondering if we can look at those, kind of like a job preview. Is there a way that we can maybe create an experience? I know that we can't just have, people coming into a classroom, but the people who went to school for teaching have had the benefit of being interns. That is not something that is afforded to somebody who does the alternative certification. I know because I did it. And
I did too.
yes, that's not what happened. Just went in, and I know that can be a little shocking. I wonder if there is room to think about a job preview type of thing, maybe even like as an event, or looking at those interviewing questions that our principals are asking and seeing how we can better vet whether or not the person that we're hiring is going to be the best candidate for that
That's
role.
been a part of our protocol now for the
Yeah.
last 3 years, not an actual experience where they go into a classroom. But we do encourage a lot of our substitutes because that gives them, a lot of them to substitute if they're thinking about being a teacher. Because that really translates into you truly understand, and honestly, I think the two most difficult jobs in the planet that were me are being a substitute and a bus driver. Because number one, you have 80 kids behind you on the bus, and you're focused on the road in today's traffic world. And then with substitutes, you're walking into an environment with kids you don't know. A lot of times in a content you don't know. And yet you're responsible for these charges as you move through the day. So we're trying to work to how we can improve their experience going in and expectations for what that's gonna be like and supporting them in that role. But what we've done with our training with Dick Finnegan, he's a recruitment retention expert in the field that he spoke with us a couple of years ago as a part of our principal training processes, and we continue to use some of his tools, was this concept of changing the interview experience to really be realistic and provide a true job preview of what you think your first 30 days in the classroom is gonna be like and how we can support you and help you be successful. You then follow that up once you have somebody on the board with those stay interviews, which we'll show some data on later.
Perfect.
In terms of what's going well, what's not going well, is this job what you expected it to be, and how can I support you in this role to be successful? And then we ask our administrators to rate that. Are they red? Are they like ready to throw the keys on the desk tomorrow? Are they green? They're thriving and they're doing really well, or at least they're settled and doing okay? Or are they yellow? And if they're in that yellow cautionary age, what else can we do to provide more support through our coaches, through our mentors, through our NELPs, to try to help them get back to the green so that we don't lose them? Because we spend, the cost of a teacher turning over is about 16 grand, is the number that we were finally able to get to working with Mr. Finnegan. By the time you have gone through the advertisement, interview, hiring, onboarding, training and support, professional development, and then they walk out the door. So if we can reduce that, it's huge.
Yeah, that's really where I'm going. I have Mr. Arguello Melendez, and then I'll go with you. Mr. Arguello?
A couple things. So I think that anyone who becomes a teacher from the real world, so to speak, is going to be very quick to leave because they've already experienced what a regular job is like, right? One where you get paid better, one where there's more potential glory and advancement, right? You come to a teacher, people begin at a teacher 22, and then you retire as a teacher at 35, and so it's not like you can see, there's only a couple of levels, right? You can be an assistant principal, or whatever, so on. There's only one superintendent job, right? So also, nobody's gonna put up with, if you haven't had to, right? It's gonna be very hard to find somebody who can put up with the abuse of a classroom, right? That's a pretty tough job, much less these high need teachers like ESE teachers, right? I mean, these are tough jobs. The only way to give them a realistic impression, and then on top of that, you add the politics involved and the pressures of a district and leadership that has these expectations, and then you pay them, you know, $45,000 a year, $47,500, and on top of all those things, it's just like, this is not that great of a job. So the only people who would want the job is people whose heart is in the specific task, right? There's no money, there's no fame, there's no glory, there's barely any appreciation. There's, you know, there's just, it's a lot to deal with for a teacher. So the only people who want to teach or who will be teaching long-term are people who actually want to be teaching. And I think that we're overlooking the population that is already in that role that we should be converting, which is our paraprofessionals, right? And I think that we begin that process by starting to pay our paraprofessionals a decent wage so that they don't leave before they can make the conversion, right? And then you convert them. If you provide them with the steps, they know already what a terrible job it is, and they're still willing to do it. But only if we provide the door and the pathway for them to achieve it. And so I think that instead of looking for an accountant who wants to come and teach math, right, only to realize that you're gonna have teenagers shooting spitballs at you, get the paraprofessional who's already been dealing with the most difficult students and get them into a teaching job, get them certified to teach, and that person's already, you know, they're gonna survive the process. And I think that this is well placed in the terms of strategic value. What prevents us from being the highest paid or one of the highest paid districts in the state by reprioritizing our funding models that are not encumbered by statutory requirements? So we are a district that spends an enormous amount of money on vendors, on specialist contracts, on consultants, on programs, and so on, that are not encumbered necessarily statutorily. Why would we not be able to switch those monies? So instead of taking care of the bells and whistles, we take care of the things that are really priority and important first, pay them to the degree that we can, realistically, to the extent that we can, the higher ends, and then include the bells and whistles that we can afford after we've taken care of that. And I think then you'll see teachers come here from all over the state, right, to deal with the same problems in a county which maybe doesn't have the same cost of living that are professionals that are do good at the job. So I think that for 2A, if we can resolve that, then 2A, 2B, 1A through C will all, you know, you're gonna resolve a lot of these issues.
I would only respectfully disagree that teaching is a terrible job on the planet. I also was an alternative certified teacher, and really found quickly that I loved my work in the classroom, although certainly it was hard, and sometimes I feel like I should go back and apologize to that first year group of students at OHS when I really didn't know what I was doing, but we did the best that we could. But I'm proud to say that 2 of them are teachers in our district and have been for a long time. There are dollars that are spent on programs that cannot be spent on salaries, but certainly the board sets the budget, and we do that in conjunction with our strategic planning process so that we can make sure that we're aligning resources with the strategic plan, because that should be what primarily drives our work. But another fundamental concern that teachers express to us is, do they have the support, the tools, the resources that they need to be successful in their jobs? For example, we've had tremendous positive feedback on this year's adoption of the ELA materials, because we hadn't been able to adopt textbooks because of the changing standards for a very long period of time. And now they have up-to-date current resources that embed high-interest, nonfiction facts, topical materials that are teaching kids the reading and writing skills that they need. So some of those bells and whistles, your teachers would say, are pretty important resources. And they may not agree with all of them, and certainly we're going to look at that and follow direction of the board.
So I've heard actually the opposite regarding the ELA materials, that the committee that reviewed the ELA materials actually chose a different ELA set of materials, and then the ELA materials that were not chosen, that came in near the bottom of the list, was actually put in at the end by a different group, and then a lot of the teachers were upset that they didn't get the ones that came in either first or second. So, I mean, but again, so I mean, we can actually talk about the individual specifics of how these things happen, but I don't, that's a problem in and of itself. If the leadership is thinking that they're happy about one thing, right, and they're not happy about that, then our focus may not be put in the correct direction so that we're making the teachers happy, so that their jobs are actually good jobs. In the sense that I guarantee you every one of these teachers would be happy if they got fewer bells and whistles that they did not use or weren't so happy about, and they were actually getting paid so that they didn't have to worry about their bills while they're teaching class. And that's the same for every single professional, right? That's not only the teachers, it's just teachers that are the ones that we expect to do their job without worrying about what their conditions at home are, or without having, the resources, and certainly paraprofessionals, right?
And that brings me to our next slide, Mr. Arroyo, which,
Sorry, Dr. Pace, there's two other people.
Oh, I
who wanted-
apologize.
No, you're totally fine.
I would just call Mr. Arguello's attention and the whole board's attention to bullet 3 on this particular slide. 129 of our instructional staff members this year came from our support staff, including 61 paraprofessionals, 10 professional staff, and 58 substitutes, because we are investing in their learning and giving them experiences that can translate into the classroom, offering free ESL classes so that those who perhaps have a degree from another country but aren't yet confident in their English skills can adopt that and then translate into the classroom. Talked with an ESE paraprofessional just yesterday at OHS who's waiting to greet students on the bus. She's working on her education degree. We provide their internship to be paid. They can hang on to their regular job so they don't have to sacrifice that salary in order to try to continue to grow our own. We have provided the virtual information sessions in English and Spanish on how to become a teacher. So we are working diligently to try to develop within.
Yeah.
The
How many
colleges
parapros
and
do we have?
universities, I don't have that exact number, we can get it. Colleges
You
and
know, Tammy, how
universities of
many about?
education are not producing nearly enough teachers to meet the needs of our school district or districts across the country. If you look at the only college and career true prep program that we have in our area, it's University of Central Florida. And they do not provide and produce enough teachers to serve Seminole, Orange, Brevard, and Osceola.
Hence the fact that we can't be at the bottom of that pay chart because they're gonna go to those counties first.
Mr. Yes, who's next? Sorry, Mr.
I'll let
Maloney.
Mr. Basco. He hasn't spoken in a while, I'll defer to him.
I
was just looking at the numbers of the instructional hire over the last several years. I assume either 19 or 20 was probably when Toho came online. I don't know, one of the.
Yes,
So Sarah or Mark,
19, this is year 4 for Toho, so it was 2019.
I haven't committed to memory, but I know the schools that are coming online over the next 5 years. Which one is it gonna be Sunbridge gonna be the next one?
We have 3K8.
Celebration
Aisle.
I'm sorry, Celebration Isle.
And then we had 3K8s in the works, and I think Kindred was getting pushed out a year, so it's the other two, Sunbridge
And Knightsbridge.
and Knightsbridge.
So we're gonna have this big mushroom cloud of hires in over the next several years. We're already
As
struggling.
we open new schools.
Yeah, so it's gonna be challenging for what's up, I would imagine.
If you look at bullet 4 on this slide, Mr. Abbas, this is something that I found interesting as we were digging into the data. We allocated 149 new allocations to accommodate growth in the 21-22 school year. When I checked the vacancy list on January the 21st, there were 149 instructional vacancies, some classroom, some non-classroom. So that's been our biggest challenge, is keeping up with our growth in student enrollment, which was about 4.4% this year.
You good, Mr. Basco?
I'm good. Okay. Yes.
No, I just wanted to defer to you. Because I was actually gonna point that out before Dr. Pace mentioned it, so I was gonna say, look, 129 other paraprofessionals, so we are trying to dig, and I do know some paraprofessionals just don't have a desire to be a teacher either, I mean, some of them are in a specific area because someone may not have a bachelor's degree, because I know that's a minimum requirement too, so you can't take somebody who doesn't even have a degree and say like, I mean, you try, and it does look like it's there, so whatever that total amount is, you can't really realistically say, okay, 50% of the paraprofessionals want to be teachers. If they wanted to be teachers, they'd be in school to become a teacher. Again, some of them want part-time jobs, some of them are just extended day, facilities before and after school. So I think that the fact that you do have over 100, targeted that are agreed to convert, I believe the effort is there, and non-traditional teachers, I think it's good to see what that is anyway. I know you said you had a gut feeling, and I appreciate your gut, don't get me wrong.
We'll check the numbers.
So I'm not trying to do that, but, because I think that is curious, and if the number is low, I don't want the district to stop recruiting from non-traditional, because we're still short,
We
and
can't.
only that, but people have experiences in the real world that sometimes it's nice for them to bring to the classroom anyway, because I think it's like a biodiversity. It makes the district better when we have people from different backgrounds teaching our students, not just, knowing from the very beginning that's what they wanted to do. But one thing I would like to see though is, and I think we're already doing it already, but just like in a spreadsheet format, the vacancies by job category. Because I think when we say instructional vacancies, we may find that, kind of like Mr. Arguello said, ESE might have more vacancies. We might have more vacancies in math. We might have more vacancies in science. So I think kind of drilling down a little bit will help the board, because I know that when we went to the FSBA conference in Tampa, there were like different folks talking about the same issue. And there were some vendors that are even bringing in, teachers, like a teacher exchange program from other countries, or give them like a migrant visa, because if we're always short on math and always short on science, then we may look at bringing folks from somewhere else to come in here on a temporary visa to be able to fill some of those vacancies, because those are exchange programs that already exist, and that's something that we could possibly look at doing.
We have a partnership with an organization called EPI. This is, the upcoming year will be our 5th year in terms of working with them on visa teachers. The challenge is gonna be, we have about 30 in the district, and then once they get to year 5, they have to go back to their home country for at least 2 years. So we're also looking at, gonna work with Mr. Kreppenbacher, do we explore sponsoring visas in some other ways? Because I get professional emails from folks who are wanting to be here, who aren't a part of one of these organizations, who are expressing an interest, but the sponsoring of visas is a complicated process. We are exploring all of those options. Today with the principals, we did some additional brainstorming, particularly perhaps in our CTE world. We're gonna look at, do we offer some adjunct positions? So maybe somebody has a full-time job as a construction superintendent, but they wanna give 2 hours back, basically, for us to pay them to teach a construction technology class at one of our schools. And perhaps we look at that with some of our job partners to say, okay, if you'll just give us this guy for 2 hours a day, we'll pay him for that and let him keep his full-time job. But an opportunity to give back and kind of, again, this responsibility, shared responsibility with the community to grow our own, so to speak. We're talking about, again, going back to offering a job share. So maybe a new mom doesn't want to work full-time, but she wants to work half the day, or a new dad for that matter, and can share that job with someone else. I worked part-time for 4 years when my children were small, and it was a wonderful relationship. The high school is a little easier. I just was scheduled for less, or 3 classes instead of 7. But you can make it work in an elementary school as well when the teachers partner well with each other. And the most important thing we're gonna have to do, because there's no way we can go away from hiring alternative certified teachers. I mean, this is a systemic issue that's gonna take a while to fix, and in the meantime, so what we have to do is better support these teachers when they come in and help them be successful and stay. That's really what that's about.
I have 2, sorry, Mr. Melendez, for interrupting you. I do have some additional questions that came up with Mr. Bass and Mr. Melendez's comments. So first, Mr. Bass's question about, we know how many schools are coming online, right? I'm wondering if this is a way that we can start we know how many schools are coming, we know how many vacancies we're going to need. Maybe not right this moment, but the recruiting process, can we maybe ramp up the recruiting process sooner? So that I don't know if you're doing that, so I'm maybe just saying something you're already doing, but starting that recruiting process sooner so that we can fill what we already know is going to be available is something to think about. If we know that we're gonna have a 4% increase in students just with those schools, then we know that we need to fill 4% more teachers. So not sure how you're doing that or the calculation, but
What we do when we're opening a new school is that right out of the gate, January 1st, we open up recruitment for that particular new school so that they can kind of get a head start on others. But remember too that when we are opening a new school, typically you're moving some students, which means you will move some staff from another school. Now, some of it is going to be growth, like you said, a 4.4% growth is significant, and you've got to have that many more teachers, but you won't hire everybody who goes to a new school brand new. Some of them will move from other places as they follow the students from those particular spots. But that's what we do. Our typical recruitment window for staff for particular schools, for example, today we will release the school budgets with allocations on February the 25th. So that's when they start to learn, we have this many allocations, this many vacancies that we have to fill, and they can start that recruitment effort, we'll do a transfer fair, all of those things throughout the spring and then throughout the summer. But with the new school, we start that process in January, so that they can kind of get started. Because too, you'll open up a transfer window there, because you might have some of these teachers who want to transfer to that new school, to have that experience, and then move forward. So it's a process. One of the things we talked about with the principals today though too is looking at, do we give them the authority to overhire in March, April, and May when there are more candidates of quality in the market, knowing that we're gonna have some attrition over the course of the summer as people move, as people's lives change, those kinds of things, so that maybe perhaps you don't need that person at COA, we'll find a home
Transfer
for
them
that
somewhere
person
else that has
somewhere
Yeah,
else.
that,
vacancy.
I mean, you can build that into the formula for hiring, I know that sounds, but I'm sure corporate America does this all the time. I still have one more question. Talent management's my thing, y'all know that. With regards to the alternative, ways of teaching or alternative schedules, I know you said you're exploring it, but how realistic do you think that is with all of the restrictions that we have for instructional staff, 1, 2, in addition to or in conjunction with exploring an alternative schedule, perhaps as one of the creative ways to attract more talent. I would encourage you to think about other things that we can add to that total package. I know that flexible work is very important, especially to the millennials and Gen Zers. That's probably like one of their number one things. I go through that as well with our own staff. They're like, can I work from home? Maybe, so, and I'm not saying that teachers can work from home. We know that can't happen. But thinking about what it is that they're looking for in a role that's not necessarily tied to how much money they make. And I know that we keep asking that. Do we ask the candidates when they're coming in? What would make this a great place to work for you, so that we can gauge from those candidates what it is that we can go ahead and implement to help them stay.
That is
So,
a part of our stay interview process, that we do with our new employees. But I'm also gonna share with you, I think it's in the superintendent's update, some exit data. Kind
Okay.
of talked about why people are leaving, because we think that's important.
Yeah.
As well as, what are people telling us is the reason that they're leaving. So that's an important piece.
thank you. Mr. Waya has a comment.
Yeah, so my comment is, there's 3 types of strategic plans in general, right? There is the plan that sees to the future, that guides a path, and then you move in that direction to achieve your goal, right? There is the strategic plan that is guiding a path to survival, right? We have to survive through a specific situation. This is a strategic plan that will allow us to survive. And then there's the ineffective strategic plan, which doesn't incorporate anything about strategy or survival or goal seeking. It's just for the sake of checking the boxes, right? So I would say that this strategic plan, and it's not like they're mutually exclusive, but this particular strategic plan, I haven't seen anything about goals, like how many teachers do we need to have in order to be an effective school district in the future when these schools open, like these gentlemen had mentioned, right? So we have schools that are opening, we should know in 5 years or in 10 years, we're expected to need X amount of teachers. This is the path to get to that many teachers in comparison to other counties or so on and so forth. But this is really like, hey, we have done this. This is what we have done. So in the end, this is an annual report, not a strategic plan. And I think that that's an important differentiation, because if we don't have a plan that's actually talking about the future, then we don't have a plan. What we have is a history book. And so looking at these bullets, for example, we're talking about what we have done, and we're not talking about what we need, And obviously, I would like to know, how many teachers do we need in 5 years? At the end of this strategic plan, at the end of 5 years, once we've achieved this strategic plan 2A, we would have hired 1,967 teachers, and we would be at 85%, which is an acceptable margin on the number of teachers that we need to be an effective district teaching kids, whatever, right?
If I may, Madam Chair, This is not the strategic plan itself, this is an update and a review to it, so it feels like a historical plan. You actually don't do the strategic plan until like every 2 years. This is just updating it and showing you the results. That's why it feels like it's results-based, because this isn't us creating the strategic plan. We create it, right, am I correct, Dr. Pace? I don't know if it's once a year or once every 2 years. The strategic plan's also not supposed to change often. You're supposed to set it and put the goals
A
in the future.
strategic plan is a living document.
No, that's what,
That's why we're doing
no,
an
actually,
update on
it is, but it doesn't live every day. It lives, you set the goals, and in 3 years, you set up another strategic plan. This is an update telling you, okay, this is where we are. If you wanna make some adjustments.
But how do we know where we are? We're just saying what we've done. Where we are and what we've done is two different things, right? In order to know where you are, you need to have a timeline and say, we are, point B is our goal, point A is our beginning point, this is where we are, right? Right here, what this is saying is this is what we've done. So we don't, there's no reference to where are we in accordance to our goals.
So if I may,
But anyways, go, continue,
I don't know if this is of any help to anybody, but I have to do a strategic plan update every quarter, and basically this is what we do. So this is goal 2A, everything else is there is the tactics that we're doing to reach that specific goal. So I don't have experience with another way of doing a strategic plan, which is probably why this feels organic to me. But this is the way that I've done it. So I don't know what the challenge is.
The purpose of today is to share with the board the things that we've done, working toward your goals and strategies, and to seek your feedback on what you think we could do differently. So just to finish up with some encouraging news on the last bullet on this particular slide, we had a job fair last Monday for transportation. We had 48 viable bus driver candidates. The following day, we attended a job fair at Valencia and identified another 15 viable candidates to either be a driver or an attendant. Typically, we've been having 2 to 4 candidates at our job fair. So we have a new communications person working in the transportation area. He comes to us from Channel 9 as a producer, and he really has amped up our game in terms of reaching folks. And the transportation team has put into place 3 weeks of rolling classes for drivers. This week it's an attendant class. I met our 5 attendants this morning while I was over at our principals meetings. They are doing night sessions to help driver candidates prepare for the required state test that they have to take over at the tag office before they can even participate in our CDL and S endorsement classes. So encouraging news in terms of this regard. If we can get half of these candidates through the gate, we would finally be able to say that we have a driver for each route and not be having to split the route so much. So we're continuing to really hold these folks' hands and encourage them to get them through the door on board. Just a couple of other things in this particular area. 2B, this is one of those things about high quality professional learning aligned to individual and organizational needs. We've recently had 21 aspiring operational leaders graduate from our Operational Leadership Academy. You have seen candidates move forward in the operational ranks. For example, Adriana Picasso, our newest coordinator in transportation, was a product of the Operational Leadership Academy program. They have also developed new instructional leadership programs and exploring leadership series for the experienced classroom teachers who demonstrate strong instructional practice. We're continuing to work to develop our instructional deans as they are aspiring leaders through a Building Leaders in Learning series to help them be more successful in their current roles, but also look to the future. Our Aspiring Assistant Principal Academy then takes that one step further. They really want to be an assistant principal. What does that look like? And then finally, we're doing some great partnerships with other universities' focuses. FAU has offered us an SDOC-specific Master's in Education program with a school leader coaching and mentoring model to accompany that. We have 9 candidates identified and agreed, signed up to participate. So we'll be partnering with St. Lucie and Indian River County to fill out that particular cohort, but really being able to kind of tailor some of the curriculum tasks to projects that are specific here in Osceola. And we're also continuing to work with UCF on micro-credentialing programs to support leadership development. You can see, I mentioned earlier that increasing the diversity of our instructional staff helps us to develop the increasing diversity of our administrators. And we have since 2016 been able to increase the number of minority Administrators by 7%. And in 2C, this is where we're really trying to provide that support to increase retention. Some of the things that you guys have already talked about, including compensation and benefits and culture. We were able to increase our minimum compensation for teachers to $47,500. So that is at that state desired minimum level for that. And one of the things that we've addressed through your legislative conversations is the salary compression problem for our veteran teachers. Our PDCP, this is the program that actually supports your alternative certification teachers here in the district in completing their certification requirements so that they can become professionally certified educators. We've aligned the PDCP program with the work that Megan's team does with the new teacher center and our mentoring activities at the school site. We have nearly 200 participants who are active in that program, and it's a minimal cost. So somebody in that alt-cert route has several different options. They can take college level classes at UCF or Valencia or other programs in order to complete their certification requirements. We offer it at a much reduced cost here in the district and tailor it specifically to their needs. We've had 4 new educator symposiums to allow new teachers to kind of come together, support each other, and demonstrate mastery of the Florida Educator Accomplished Practices, which is part of that getting your professional certification checklist. We now have 40 instructional mentors supporting over 400 new teachers at our 19 highest need schools. And we have 9 more new educator leads added to the group at 9 schools to also increase support for new teachers. Board, this is something I really would like for us to consider growing. Our principals would really support this idea. If we look at new teacher retention data for those teachers who've had or been working with an instructional mentor, it's gone from 70% before we implemented the program to 90% last year and 88% in 2021 so far. So this is really making a difference in helping our teachers to feel successful, feel success, and be in the game and stay in the game. Also talked this morning with the principals about what are some of those practices that TNTP through the Insight Culture Group has identified to say, you do these things and more teachers are willing to stay, particularly your best teachers. The number 1 high yield strategy is an administrator providing meaningful feedback to teachers. Increases their longevity in the profession. The number 2 thing is helping them to feel valued and asking them to stay as a member of your team. So really that intentional outreach. And the point that I made with the principals is both of those strategies cost nothing. Absolutely nothing. And those are the things that are really motivating our teachers to stay in the classroom. Any other questions about goal 2?
No questions, but I do wanna just say this is really something that you guys should be proud of. I mean, 90% retention in any industry.
It's not everywhere, but this is where the work that our mentors are doing.
Yeah, so this is the teachers that have gone through the program. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
All right, that brings us then to goal 3, fiscal responsibility. Obviously, this is an important one of the board. Operational efficiency, the quarter penny sales tax conversation, which is just starting to kind of develop, and a local vendor education campaign that now has been expanded to include a small business and local vendor business policy work, and then equitable distribution of resources. As you know, we have purchased and assigned digital devices to 94% of all of our district students. We've added 16 elementary attractive programs through our Choice and Innovation Office to make sure that every one of our elementary schools has something that makes them unique, they can develop and market to their community. We've allocated over $880,000 in federal ESSER II funding to increase the PLC time at our high-need schools. We've increased our bit site score from 690 to 750, meeting the metric that we established when we developed this strategy and the strategic plan. We are working diligently on the business process mapping and now have a detailed plan and timeline. This is in preparation, Mr. Melendez and members of the board, for the idea that we're gonna have to transfer to a new ERP system somewhere down the road. But we can't transition to a new system until we really have mapped our processes and know what that system will need to do for us. So that's an important part of that particular thing. gathering some data to support what would be a sales tax outreach and education campaign. We have policies that you've been reviewing for small business and veteran vendor programs, and we've begun data gathering for our preliminary diversity analysis.
Are we starting like to pre-save for that? Like, I don't know what you wanna call it, like a reserve, because ERP is uber expensive, no matter how you slice it. You know, I don't care how efficient you wanna be, it's gonna be in the multi-millions no matter what.
Uber expensive, and that'll be a part of your budget discussions on February the 15th when we have our budget workshop, our first really kind of, this is where we are with the budget, this is what we anticipate, what are our priorities going to be moving forward. Okay, remember that we have a budget workshop in February. We typically schedule individual meetings with the board between February and our next workshop that's published in June. We come back in August with the first public hearing and conversation about the budget, and then it's adopted in September. And we also typically try to bring any updates to the strategic plan at that time.
We look to see if there's any specific grants for that, because we can't be the only district that had to modify its ERP system. You know, whether it's a private grant or public grant or state grants, there's gotta be something out there, somebody can research it to help, because that is a significant change, you know what I mean? And I just can't imagine not being something out there, IT related, whether it's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or something like that to help the district transition. So, I mean, just something to explore.
I certainly will task the team with looking for those kinds of options out there on the market. I've not heard of anything lately, but having experience in ERP transition that went really, really badly in another district experience, I know how important it is to make sure that you are very careful and intentional before you ever flip the switch, so to speak, and it has to start with that mapping of the processes. Okay, so just some next steps. We're continuing to work on our data governance solutions and business process mapping, working toward a more in-depth implementation of Chronos in terms of timekeeping. We're reviewing our staff models for both our high-need schools and also our largest schools. Our support staffing models were developed back in 2008, Mr. Melendez, when you were on the board and I was on the district leadership team. And they've really not been tweaked since then. So that's something that we've been seeking some feedback from principals on to see their needs, and that was a conversation that I also had with them today. We have extended additional funding for PLC time at all schools. It doesn't mean that every PLC is taking advantage of that, but we had some high-functioning PLCs that were just like, if we could have one more hour a week, it would really help us dig into our student data, dig into our curriculum unit plans, and work together to move the needle on student achievement. So with the ESSER dollars, we've been able to do that. We're looking at what else are we gonna need to make sure that from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that our one-to-one implementation was sustainable. The sales tax piece, the preliminary diversity analysis, and then the next step is to, once we have board policy in place, to implement a small business and veteran vendor program. Please understand that I don't believe we have staff currently adequate, and I mean, not that they're not capable, but we just don't have enough capacity currently in our procurement department to implement and monitor and support that kind of a program. So that is something that we'll also need to talk about in the budget planning process moving forward. Because there has to be a huge education component and monitoring of that process to make sure that it's implemented with fidelity. Any comments, questions, or concerns about goal 3? Okay, moving on. That brings us to goal 4, community engagement and governance. This is all about our family engagement programming, primarily our work with the Alliance for Public Schools, and then our Choice and Innovation Office's work, as well as then our governance plan. Excited to say that we had a very exciting choice fair back in November. We had over 3,200 people in attendance that we were able to count, probably more, but that was as many as we could click coming through the door. That does not include the staff and students that were there to either man a booth or perform or entertain or those types of things. We received, the team set up an actual computer bank on site where parents could go in and fill out their choice application with support from the district staff. 211 parents took advantage of that at the fair. By week 6, we've had over 1,600 applications, and really exciting, 720 of those would be new FTE for the district. So these are students that are coming from either new kindergarten babies or homeschool, private school, charter schools that have chosen based on their experience in working with us to potentially come to FTE or bring FTE to the district. This is in addition to the 9,000 students, about 17% of our population, that already exercise choice. In other words, they're going to a school outside of their home zone area. Their parents know that they're providing transportation except for our magnet programs, that they've chosen a program or a culture that better meets their family's needs.
I have a question about the marketing for our choice programs in general. Do we specifically target within Osceola County, or do we also target outside the boundaries of Osceola?
We primarily target our Osceola community, although we're also open, of course, to applications or interest from Polk, and we get some from Orange.
Okay. Have we thought about,
We really don't have access to that student information outside of our school district.
okay, I mean through social media though. I don't know how your algorithm is, but that might be something to
I can
think about.
certainly work with Dan and the team to see where we boost,
Yeah.
That's a good idea. And then the partnership with the Alliance for Public Schools is planning our second Power Up for Success Family Engagement Conference. The first one we did digital, which wasn't ideal, but we had high engagement. And the good thing about doing it digitally was that parents who didn't necessarily log in live were able to still follow up afterwards to see that particular piece. Shauna, do you have updated numbers on attendance of that? No, okay, we can get that information. The next one on March 26th is coming up, and we're in the process of planning for that. The first family engagement for Power Up for Success conference really was more about here's information on things that we do and things that we offer. We really want this one to be about this is what you can do as parents to be more actively involved in supporting your students' education and success here in our community and getting involved in the school district with that stakeholder engagement. It's been interesting because the one common theme, there's been just a couple, but one in particular common theme of my focus group conversations, and this was from everybody, teachers, support staff, students, to the community stakeholder groups, was about expanding opportunities for financial literacy in education, both for our students and for our staff and for our families. So looking at potentially offering, a financial literacy session at maybe a parent night at some of our schools, because people get into so much trouble if they don't really understand banking and credit right out of the gate, particularly young people when they start getting those credit applications. And two of our participants on Friday, Julius can share with you, offered to help us with that. So I've already given their contact information to the T&L team to try to kind of follow up. And we're gonna include a family literacy component, a financial literacy component as a part of this Power Up for Success based on that community stakeholder engagement. And then the Student Alliance is also working at Liberty High School and Osceola County School for the Arts, ongoing with the goal of strengthening school culture and building toward a Grad Nation event on April the 8th. And then as you know, we do have our Master Board training we had to revisit the last time, but currently we're scheduled for February the 24th and March 31st. February the 24th was originally gonna be a half-day session. Carol's suggestion was that we try to do that as a full-day session. Then March 31st would be half a day, and then we would just have to have one more follow-up half a day later on. But that's up to you, and we can determine those dates when we're together in February.
This is where we start our next strategic planning conversation. That's part of the, okay. Thank you. Because that's the last slide on this particular goal, I do have a question, or getting the board's pulse on expanding on this for our next strategic plan. I know that it says community engagement and governance, but I really wanna call out parent engagement. I think that is essential, and while, I do see that we have the Alliance for Public Schools working with our parents to kind of form that relationship, I think we need to do more. I'm very passionate about that. I think that the more opportunities that we can give parents to participate in their students' learning journey, the more engaged the students themselves are gonna be. And so that might even help some of our other goals to increase as well, our other metrics. So as we're thinking about where we wanna go over the next couple of years, I would encourage you to think about possibly calling out parent engagement specifically and seeing if we can come up with some ways to do that. I don't know who was first. They're both,
Doesn't matter.
oh, actually, I do know who was first, Mr. Melendez. There's a little timer here.
Okay, and I do agree that parental engagement can be there, but also on 4A, I wouldn't mind that bullet point, because I was very impressed with that little meeting that you had, and because it was very quick and to the point. And I believe you said that you had a schedule with different chambers too, like the Asian chamber, the African American chamber, or whatever different subgroups that you could do. I think that should actually be formalized, because if I wasn't there that day, I wouldn't have known that. And I think that's a very good thing, because, you know, each person said, hey, what was good, what was bad, what needs improvement. And I think that the board should kind of know the good work that you're doing, and then maybe you can even share with us too, like the common responses. You know, like common response, for instance, was communication. Everyone kept saying that, you know, they get a lot of phone calls. You know, I mean, people sometimes they get too much communication, but you know, I'd rather have too much communication than too little communication that parents are aware. And that's something they only got because I went there, because we think we could be doing a good job communicating, but are the stakeholders thinking the same thing too? And so you having regularly scheduled meetings, maybe even say once a year, you should have a follow-up with that same group. So maybe choose like 6 or 7 subgroups that you think, maybe the St. Cloud Chamber, the Poinciana Chamber, whatever. You're the superintendent, I'm not gonna micromanage it. The point is, if you have like a regular, I know you meet with the students, for instance, the seniors. And so I think that needs to be a part of here. So pick like 10 different subgroups that you think that's a good cross-reference, and actually make that a part of the strategic plan, then give us the feedback on those. And because I think that was very good to know. And I wanna share that with the rest of the board, because I just happened to be there and I just saw those 5 minutes alone that I was there. It was a very productive meeting.
We try to keep them to 1 hour. We invite people in either at breakfast or at lunch so that, you know, business people can get away. We did this my first year as superintendent in 2016, so we felt like it was important to do this again. And I agree, I would be happy to do it every year because the feedback that we get is so valuable. I do meet with a group of teachers, students, and school-related employees of the year every year. And with the seniors, I typically meet with them 3 times. Once at the beginning, once in the middle, and then once at the end. But yeah, I want to, I think, build this in, and I think that's a great idea to build it into this plan to make it formalized. Because we really do try to make sure that the most important big rocks, in terms of things that we need to get done and accomplish, are in the strategic plan. And we do have metrics that are a part of the comprehensive plan that I'm just reporting to you today, some of that data.
And see, the benefit of that too is it makes a participant want to do more too. So if they gave you a suggestion and they saw it go all the way up to the board, they're like, man, the superintendent was really listening. And you are, I'm pretty sure, changing some of your thought process based on that. But if there's a formal process that they can see it where it's tangible, then I'm gonna wanna participate more. You know what I mean? Like if I feel like the person's really listening.
Well, like financial literacy, we talked on as a team on Monday, hey, this is a common thread, let's use Power Up for Success to go ahead and introduce it, so.
Mr. Waya has a comment.
Maybe along the lines of what you were talking about, Madam Chair, is that maybe we completely split them apart and governance be one thing and engagement be something else. Because whether it be community or parental engagement, I agree the parental engagement in this situation is key. So maybe you have parental and community engagement, and then you have another section completely for governance.
Okay. Appreciate the feedback. And then finally, this brings us to goal 5, our school safety and security goal, which this year really is centered around attendance and then mental health needs of our students. Regarding attendance, we talked earlier about the fact that we have been able to hire through the specific dollars from the CARES grant that were allocated to this purpose. They could not be used for anything else. 14 new staff members to support our schools in the area of attendance. They are working with the school attendance clerks, they're working with the school administration, with our social workers, our student services team to reach out to parents, send letters, send communication, call people, go visit houses, to try to make sure that we're getting people to understand that they have to come to school on a regular basis. We've located and accounted for all the did not enters. We now have implemented our Everyday Pro Data dashboard to provide daily reports to our schools about chronic absences. We are very close to having language to recommend regarding revised descriptions for people who are late, or tardy, or partial absences, because we do know there's a very big difference between being 10 minutes late and 2 hours tardy to you missed a half the day. And we want to be able to kind of capture that information. In addition, our homeless wraparound specialists are providing extra support for our homeless families struggling with school attendance. This is a problem that, as I mentioned earlier, has seemed to increase in some respects. So that is something that we're working on. I'm also just sharing with the board, we've seen an uptick in 18-year-olds all of a sudden finding themselves without a place to go, without a place to stay, with parents just saying, okay, happy birthday, here you go. So Elizabeth and her team are working with Leslie Campbell and her team to really wrap our arms around these students, help them find some kind of alternative housing to get them through their senior year, work them through the process of changing enrollment if we need to for schools, providing some additional support with food cards or whatever it is that they need to make sure that we can get them successfully to May. And I talked with Dr. Arnott this morning and our CTE team. I want to also provide them with information about our short-term rapid credential programs, because you know, if they could spend 10 weeks with us or go to a rapid credentialing program at night and get a construction OSHA certification or a Microsoft Office certification, it would greatly increase their opportunities for success post high school. So that is just something that, again, I think reflects some of the stress that we forget that our families are experiencing.
You have a high altitude number of how many students that you don't.
One is too many, but I know
No,
there's
one,
a
absolutely.
handful,
Okay.
is at least what I would say.
Mr. Melendez has a question as well, Dr. Pace.
Dr. Pace, I don't wanna say controversial, but when I think of homeless wraparound specialists, we're really doing a service to that student, right? Kinda like how we have with the SRO program, you know, the cities or the county, you know, help us subsidize us. Have we thought about like tracking where they're coming from? Like say for instance, let's say 20% are coming from St. Cloud and we do homeless wraparound specialists, we're really providing a whole student, you know, taken care of. Now, we thought about maybe looking at, if we need, say, 2 specialists, because they're in the St. Cloud area or the St. Cloud schools to support them, because there's a lot there. And we thought about maybe asking the city of St. Cloud to help us pay for that position, say like 50-50 or whatever the percentages are. The point is, you know, we're providing a service to the city too. You know, I mean, we're taking care of that student for everything they need. Now it's kind of like we're going beyond our role as educators, and we're kind of taking care of that student's whole family. So I was just thinking, you know, hey, you know, we're doing a great service, you know, hey, maybe the city can help pay for that, you
We
know.
certainly can explore breaking down that data. We don't provide housing, I mean, that's not our job, but we try to make sure that the family has access to resources that are existing in our community that they may not know about, as well as, like I said, then we've got through some of our grants and our mental health allocation, we can provide counseling, we can provide food cards, we can provide some of those things to meet basic needs to make sure that the student is able to get to school and have some chance of success. Uniforms, school supplies, that kind of stuff.
So I believe in the program, and I think it's valiant. I'm just saying that we're kind of stretching ourselves a little bit, that if the cities or counties know that we're helping their constituents too, to a certain degree, beyond education, if we get some form of subsidy.
Okay, and just moving on, because we're coming to the end of our time, and I've got some information about graduation rate I wanted to share with you. This does show the actual improvements in attendance. It is much better this week than it was the second week of January. The second week of January, we were truly with COVID in survival mode. Just making sure we got kids to school, got them fed, and got them home even if it was late. With the number of staff and students that were out in that particular piece. But that number is significantly coming down, and we're happy to get back to a true focus on learning. And then in terms of goal 4 or 5B, we've added 4 additional mental health counselors to help meet the needs of our students. We've had an increase in mental health referrals of 300 from the same point last year. directed by the board, upon enrollment at New Beginnings, our mental health staff are meeting with the students and families to offer counseling as an optional service, and we are working through the process to make sure that all of our staff has both levels of the cognitive threat assessment training. Our goal is to continue to promote mental health training to our newly hired teachers and staff. It is an expectation by the state that all staff members will be certified in youth mental health first aid in order to provide the right services to our kids. Doesn't mean that we become counselors, but it does mean that we start to be able to identify some of those trouble signs so that we can refer students to counselors or our social workers or psychologists, depending on what the need is. And then working to promote it, ensure that our threat assessment training is completed. And then this is your opportunity to provide additional direction, questions. I really appreciate the level of engagement in the workshop today so far.
I don't have a personal question, but as I look in the audience, there is a lot of knowledge sitting in front of me. I saw some hit bobs and is there anything that, I know there's a little bit out of here. Is there anyone in the room who have anything or any comments, suggestions? You heard the same material we have. Is there any input anyone wants to have, wants to add?
This is the team doing the work.
I know. No, I know, I understand that. I was just, but sometimes things pop in your mind as we're talking, so. Okay, I just wanted to give them the opportunity.
Well, actually,
Good idea.
well, with regards to that, because I feel like when we're doing a workshop, we're all working together and this is kind of a separation. Do you remember when we used to sit over there?
Yeah, that was
Why
fun.
can't we do that again? I feel separated from y'all and I shouldn't be. So
We
I
can do that
don't know if, I know it was COVID, but I felt like it was more of a conversation when we were sitting back there. So if we can implement that, I don't know if anybody else has an issue with that, but I
think it's time. That would be great. We would appreciate that.
And thank you for all of that, everything, all of you, appreciate it.
I asked my questions and my suggestions. I don't know if anyone was taking notes
Yes.
about,
That's what
okay,
this team does.
so hopefully we can have those notes for our master board and we can, if we end up working on our strategic plan then we can kind of expand on some of the questions and suggestions that we had during this time. So I'm all settled. Anyone else?
We're asking.
William?
I just wanted to share some additional more detailed information about graduation. Just gotta change out the PowerPoint here. All right. I have already reported to you that we did see a dip in our graduation rate by 1% from 90.7% to 89.7%. That was disappointing, but if you round up, we're still at 90%, which is basically where the state average is. And we know that our schools have done an amazing job in everything that they could do, but I want to share with you some additional detailed data and then ask for any input or insight you guys have. As you can see, since 2011, our district graduation rate has increased from 77.5% to 89.7%, so that's a 12.2 increase over 10 years. And since 2007-8, which we really started working on this effort, I think Mr. Melendez, you were on the board, we've increased from 63% to 90%, even though testing requirements have been raised and other graduation requirements have changed. Very much an intentional focus on this particular number because it's so important to the trajectory of our students, their families, and our community. This is our district versus charter comparison. The district does continue to have a higher graduation rate than our charter schools, but our charter schools did see an increase this past year. We appreciate the work that Dr. Rafalski has done with Main Street in particular. It is an at-risk school, but they did do some better work last year and have a stronger administrative team in place today than they even did a year ago. I'm really super proud of our subgroup graduation rates for 2020-21. This is district and district without charters, but as you can see across the board, we are above the state average, except for our white subgroup, which is just 91.6 compared to 91.8. So we're doing some good work in moving the needle with our students from different subgroups, which is data that we have to report to both the state and the federal level every year. This shows in particular for our free and reduced lunch students a 4.7% increase since 2016. For our ELL students, a 16.3% increase, and for our students with disabilities, a 12.9% increase. So doing some solid work there and making sure that all of our students have that opportunity to be successful at the graduation level. This is broken down by high school. You can see that there were some ups and a few downs. We are working intentionally with those schools who saw a decline in their graduation rate to identify what was missed, what happened with the data, and what is it that we're going to do about it in the coming school year. Some highlights to celebrate since 2018-19. Poinciana High School's ELO graduation rate went up by almost 12%. Their Toho High School's graduation rate for students with disabilities increased by almost 4%. OVS had a strong overall graduation rate despite their increase in enrollment last year to serve our students during the pandemic of 19%. And also Toho High School's overall graduation rate increased by 2.3%. This is a number that we're digging into more deeply. Historically, our dropout rate has been low. But what it means when you're truly a dropout is that you don't graduate on time and you just fall off the map, okay? We don't get you back enrolled in an ALCO program or GED program. We don't get you to do a 5th year with us and then just finish a year behind. Just something happens and we don't know where you go. And that's concerning because you can see last year it increased, it doubled, and then this year it went up again some more, and that's out of line with the comparison for other districts. So we are looking at exactly what happened with that. And I've got some data that I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes that we're looking at in terms of to see if that's part of the issue. In terms of Got College, this is the number of students who enroll in a Florida public university. So it does not include students who go, for example, to a technical college. It doesn't include students who go out of state. It doesn't reflect students who go to a private school like Rollins or Stetson. This is in a 2 or 4 year Florida public university. This was a number that has significantly lagged in the past beyond neighboring districts in the state, as you can see. In 2013, it was only 44% of our students were matriculating on to a school, to a 4-year university program or a Florida public university program. The number has increased by 8% over time compared to the state's increase of just 3%. We did see a dip in 2018 and 19, just a little bit, but we feel like, that's something that we're coming up. We know that this number in 2020 will be lower because of that spring of digital, but we're continuing to work on that, and the data that I reported to you about FAFSA completions and current colleges acceptances are such a critical piece of this work. We also know that Abbott has that strong college and career readiness focus, and our goal now is to have every student graduate with a plan in the 4 E's. Enroll, enlist, employ with a career certification in your back pocket, or explore with an intentional year to take a gap year, do something else that you want to do to decide what you want to do for your particular future. One of the parents who came to our focus group this week, said his daughter was the kid who really didn't know what she wanted to do, but was determined to go to college anyway. He'd had a similar experience, wasted some money, came out, enlisted in the Army, and then came back and now has a bachelor's and a master's degree in a very successful business. So we know that not everybody's ready right after high school to jump into this, but they may come back to it later. But we want that to be an intentional choice, not just a lack of a plan. This is our post-secondary institute compared to other districts around us, our comparison districts that we look at. And again, I'm proud of the fact that we are working hard to close that gap. One of the questions that the board had when I talked to you about graduation rate previously was, what was the impact of digital learning on graduation? It's interesting because our students who were digital, both in Survey 2 in October and Survey 3 in February, were successful. Their graduation rate was almost as high as our kids who were face-to-face all year. So 94.6% in the first column to 95.4% in the third column. In the second column, you're looking at students who were digital survey in Survey 2, so they were like digital in October, and then they came back to us, say for example in January or sometime before the FTE in February or vice versa. But most of them were digital first semester or part of first semester and then came back to us. And that was at almost 89%, okay? And then our face-to-face we've talked about. The next number I want to bring your attention to, for students who did not stick with us for a whole year, either they didn't enroll at all, they moved away before their senior year, or they were with us for a short period of time, like they came in, for example, maybe in February or March, okay, past FTE period, or they were with us in August and they left before October, for whatever reason, their graduation rate dropped to 47.3%. So I do feel like our schools are doing the right work in really holding hands with these seniors as we prepare them for graduation, making sure that they're attacking their credits that they need, their GPA that they need, and those important test requirements that
How
they
do we
need.
know, Dr. Pace, like if they moved out of state, how do we know if they graduated or not, or what happened?
If they're not reported as graduates, then they count as a dropout. So if they move out of state, it's our job to make sure we find them where they went. We do that by tracking back records. So for example, they moved to New York. We get a records request from New York, and then that kid is coded as withdrawal out of state. They don't count in the dropout rate. But these are kids that go someplace, we never get another request for records. We call, we send someone to the prior house, we ask neighbors, do you know what happened to so-and-so? And we hear crickets.
Okay, so this, we don't know, like this is not the number, this is a number including a lot of we don't knows, right, at the end.
These are students who are not showing up as a withdrawal to another public school somewhere or even a private school somewhere, or as a graduate someplace else.
And to be safe, you code it as a dropout. You don't wanna accidentally make the numbers look better. You'd rather, hey, if you can't get hold of them,
We can't,
Call it
we have to
dropout.
scrub that data clean each and every year. So that is something that our REA team does as well in terms of identifying that cohort of kids each year, so that we don't wait until they're seniors to figure out, oh, what happened to Julius when he was in 9th grade? He's still showing up in this graduation cohort, he hasn't been with us for 3 years, where is he? So every year we're trying to track down these kids who don't return to us, the do not enters, or when they withdraw, monitoring those requests for records when they come in, or following up with families or neighbors to say, where did you end up? Where do we need to send your records to say you're not a dropout? So this is an interesting piece. We had 480 non-grads in 1920. Of these, 193 students enrolled at some point during the 2021 school year, okay? Of those who enrolled, 90 attended the 5th year, but then ended up dropping out or withdrew. They were not successful in meeting our needs. 49 of them, however, came for their 5th year and were successful in meeting the graduation requirements. 34 of them enrolled, but never actually showed up the first day. And then 20 of them are still with us, working to get those graduation requirements. That primarily is our exceptional student education students who are entitled to free and public education through their 21st birthday. So out of our non-graduates who enrolled with us in the following year, 31% were successful in graduating in that 5th year. So we feel like that's an important number. What we want to capture, however, is those 90 and those 34 and 20. Let's make sure they know about what other options are out there. Work on a GED or an adult high school program at ALCO. Let's look at other opportunities for you to continue education. Main Street will still enroll students after that particular time. Because we know that if they graduate without, or they move on without something, they are forever behind the 8 ball in terms of achieving that life goal of a living wage that can support a family. One of the other questions that's been asked is, what about our credit recovery labs, our Edgenuity labs? And what does that look like for our students? This is data from the class of 1920. The orange bar are the students who took at least one research course during their 4-year high school trajectory. So at some time, they took a credit retrieval class in our Edgenuity labs compared to all SDOC 12th grade students for 1920. 25% participated in one credit retrieval method. In terms of our graduation rate for those students who completed one research course or more, 24% of them went on to graduate. And 16% of those who enrolled in an Edgenuity course went on to college or university. And this top 10 enrollment is showing where our students went. Largest percent of our graduates in that particular class attended Valencia College, about 58%, which we would consider normal. We try to pull them in there. It's a nice way to get a great education at a reasonable cost and then move on to something else. UCF, USF, University of Florida, and then you can kind of see down the list. The same was really true for our 12th graders who took at least one research course. Valencia, National University College, and Polk State College. We have put measures in place for Edgenuity Labs. We have a district resource teacher who is dedicated to helping to train the teachers, monitoring the student progression, making sure that we are enrolling kids correctly and supporting their learning so that they're achieving mastery as they complete these courses. But we know of far too many students who start their 9th grade year, for example, right out of the gate. They get off on the wrong track. They fail 3 or 4 classes right out of the gate. This is their opportunity to catch up and graduate with their peers in that 4-year period of time. I think that's it. Oh, finally, I did want to point out to the board, we did have test waivers for the last 2 years for graduation requirements from the state. There's been no indication that there's going to be statutory relief from those graduation testing requirements. I did learn yesterday, however, that the state board is meeting on February the 9th to look at potentially going back to the standard that we had prior to the school year in terms of the concordant cutoff score, and also allowing the PERT for another year, which is an alternative method for students to meet the requirements for Algebra 1 EOC. But of our graduates last year, for the 21-22 school year, the 2021 graduates, 2,116 met all of the standard testing requirements by passing their FSA ELA or the Algebra or Geometry EOC. We had 1,608 of them who met that requirement through a concordance score on either the SAT or the ACT. We had 418 who were exempt due to the testing relief, and then we had another 366 who met that assessment requirement through an ESC testing waiver. This is why the board's investment in the SAT and the ACT are so important, because when kids take these tests, they can achieve this concordance score, but it also gives them a sense of confidence that, you know what, I am potentially college ready, because that's what that number reflects. And maybe this is something that I can do. So I appreciate the board's investment in that ACT for every junior and SAT for students who have not been successful in their senior year on meeting these concordance scores, and we'll be offering that again this spring.
Or Mr. Arbery, I know you had a question earlier. Did you already ask it?
Well, I had one question which was answered, which was the graduation rate of Main Street and so on. We're obviously affecting our graduation rates negatively on some of these. In terms of the slide that just went past where it was the recovery program, last time I think I mentioned it, I had pulled a number out of the sky and I said 75%. It looks like 75% coincidentally is correct. That were it not for these recovery classes, 75% of our graduation rate would be 75%.
Not necessarily. I mean, there are other alternative means. Summer school programs, night classes, 7th period. Those are other ways.
According to this
get
chart, I'm
credits.
saying.
But we have found the Edgenuity Labs to be successful in doing that because so many of our students have jobs. So coming in the summer and doing a summer school course, doing an extra class at the end of the day is not an option for their families. One of the things that we did back in 2007, 8, 9 to increase the graduation rate was to move to a 7-period day for all of our high schools. Prior to that, it had been a 6-period day, so that students really only had one chance to earn their 24 credits in 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th grade unless they were able to stay after school or come to summer school.
That's not really my concern, really.
Okay, I was just explaining the background.
I think it's an option, right? And they should have more than one option so that they can get through high school. The point is not to prevent them from graduating. On that, we agree. My concern is that, so our graduation rate without these recovery classes would be about 75% according to this. So it may fluctuate but just according to the numbers here that you've provided, the two options, either you graduate with or you graduate without. So my concern is the amount of students that are actually being prepared, right? Because if you get put into one of these recovery classes, they're not necessarily getting the instruction that you would get in a regular classroom. You're sitting at a computer and you're doing it on your own at your own pace and so on. So for some that may work, for some it may not. But it happens to be a coincidence. I said 75%, it actually is. I was surprised by that. The other thing is how our graduation rate reflects with our proficiency rate and with the rate with which our students are taking remedial classes when they get to Valencia. So I think that those are numbers, especially because we have these agreements with Valencia that obviously are supposed to be sharing information. That would be information that I think is critical for this slide, which is how are our kids doing when they graduate? If the number of kids that go to Valencia, for example, and take remedial classes is reflecting the same amount of proficiency that we know about it when they're graduating, then there's no point in reporting graduation numbers because they're not honest, right? We might as well actually say this is what the situation regarding education is, and this is what the plan is to improve it and to fix it and so on. So, but that's just my comment.
And I appreciate that, sir. I would just bring you back to this particular slide. Only 418 of our graduates last year did not meet the testing requirement or did not have an ESE waiver in some shape or fashion. Okay, 1,608 achieved it through a concordance score. That means on the SAT or the ACT, they're demonstrating college readiness. Or they achieved it through the FSA, ELA, or Algebra and Geometry EOC, which also demonstrates that they are proficient. And we had 1,098 who were in a research class at some point in time in their high school career. So over half of them demonstrated college readiness.
Half is not a great number,
I understand,
right?
I understand.
Okay.
But I'm happy to follow back up with the CV data and help with that Valencia and UCF comparison.
The goal, I don't know if everyone agrees with me or not, but the goal would be for 100% of graduates to be ready for college, right?
Or
So-
careers has been our goal, college or career.
Well, in the end, they should all be educated to the same level, and then once they get out of, which is a GE, right? It used to be, you got your high school diploma, it meant that you graduated from high school knowing what you were supposed to learn in high school, right? So now if what we're saying is, you gotta be ready for college, right? But if you're not going to college, you don't have to be as smart as the ones that are. I don't think that's the message that we wanna put out, right? Exactly, I'm not even in agreement with that statement, I'm just saying that when you get a high school diploma from Osceola County Schools, everyone should be at least that smart. Right now, we're giving X amount of graduation diplomas, only 50%, like you said, are that smart, right? As what the diploma would.
We were just talking about 50% of the students, less than 50% of the students who took a research class, who at some point in time were not behind, or were behind, okay? 90% of our graduates graduated meeting the testing requirement.
Well, here, so 366, the three that got a waiver, they got a waiver, so we don't know.
So 700.
Another way of looking at it is everyone supposed to take the SAT, or is it like a voluntary, like either SAT, ACT? Do we make that a requirement? Because in that way you could tell really quickly if every 10th grader, I'm making it up, had to take the SAT, whether or not they wanted to go to college or not.
This
SAT,
board does
ACT.
provide a free school day test, ACT for juniors and SAT for seniors who've not yet met their concordance score. We don't necessarily get 100% of them, it's not a graduation requirement for us, but it's what we offer as an alternative for them to meet this graduation requirement, free.
Yeah, and I was just saying, just as a way to benchmark their proficiency levels, because you could tell, because they give you back a score at the end of the test.
And
That way
we do
you
look at
can-
those numbers.
And if 100% passed the SAT or got an acceptable score on the SAT, and then half of them are taking remedial classes, that would tell the community that the problem's not us, it was somebody, it's whoever's next, right? Or that the test itself is not right. So but the point is, these are just to say, hey, we're at 90% graduation, that's a good number, and then everybody shrugs, and then everybody goes home thinking, okay, job well done. That's not the case.
I don't think anybody doesn't want to have a 100% graduation rate. I'm
The graduation rate isn't the issue for me. I don't care what that number is at all. What I care about is 100%. No, what I care about is 100% of our students having the same level of opportunities in the future that a high school diploma represents, right? So I don't care if they don't go to college or they do go to college or whatever, but if you graduated from Osceola High School, everyone in the world should know that that meant that you met these specific standards, and that's what it represents, right? That's what a high school diploma
So
is.
everyone needs to graduate passing the FSA, correct? Because that would be the benchmark instead of doing any of the concurrent scores? Is
So
that what your
not
what your
not really,
qualification
not
would
really. But using Mr. Melendez's example, he was saying the SAT or the ACT. So if all of our students, right, passed the ACT or SAT 100%, then at least we would be representing every single one of our students past the ACT or the SAT. According to what the SAT and ACT represents, we did a good job because that's the target, that's the national standard, right, of being able to perform in college. Now, if they go to college and they flounder because they're taking our remedial classes, that says something about the exam, not about us. But if we're giving 90% of kids a high school diploma, and then only 30% of those kids, or let's say 70% of those kids are ready for college or less, then that says something about what we're representing our diploma is, which means that you cannot trust a diploma, right? So in the end, saying that 90% of our students graduated from high school, well, what does graduating from high school mean? For everyone in the audience and everyone here, graduating from high school meant something, right? Does it mean the same today as it did when we all graduated from high school? Is the question.
Dr. Pace, the concurrent scores that we use, this is something that all other school districts are using in order to help those students who were not able to pass the FSA
In the state of Florida.
in the state of Florida. So I'm assuming that the reason that they did that was because not every student is going to pass that test.
Correct.
Right, so we're not doing anything here that is outside of what the state of Florida says a high school diploma is equivalent to. This is the way that they have decided as a board. You either pass the FSA, ELA, or college algebra, I didn't see the other test, or you pass these concurrent tests, and this means this is equal rate, you have graduated from high school according to the state of education.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that would be the minimum that we would, so the state puts out a minimum, right? Because the state of Florida doesn't want to have graduation rates that are 30% or 50% even, right? Or even 70%. They want graduations rates that reflect exactly what in the slide that you showed, which are hovering around 90%. So that's fine, we met that standard. We met the legal standard. Frank checked the box for us and said, you guys are 90%, you guys are okay. You're not gonna get sued for absolutely ruining all these kids' future, that's fine. But number one, I'm not representing the state. Number two, the state standard, if those kids, same thing, I would say the state of Florida, other states probably immensely worse, we're still not representing their diplomas today, are not representing what they used to be when we all graduated from high school, is my point. I mean, are we arguing over someone understanding the point that I'm trying to make, or are we arguing over, you don't agree that that's our duty? That's two different things, because I agree it's not our duty, right, to go beyond it.
That's not even at all what I'm saying. So two things. First, I did have a little bit of trouble trying to follow where you thought we did not meet the requirement. According to the requirement, and I'm gonna change the word requirement benchmark, because it's a benchmark, right? We met that requirement. We met that benchmark with the two options, or three in some cases, that we have in order to report graduation rates. So the information that we are sharing with our community is not incorrect, and I think that that's an important point. The benchmark is here, we met the benchmark, and so the information is not incorrect. So I think we need to all agree on that. However, it sounds like what you're saying is we should be higher. We should have more kids pass the FSA, which is the I don't wanna say it's harder, but it is more challenging to pass that test. If that's the point you're making, I agree. But I don't want you, well, you can do whatever you want. I don't, personally, I feel like we're doing a disservice to our community saying that we didn't meet the requirement when in fact we did. And every other school district is reporting numbers in that way. So the data isn't incorrect. If we need to retire, cool, bro, let's do that. I wanna retire, but let's not say that we didn't meet the standard,
I
because
don't
we
understand
did.
what that means, but what I'm
Cool,
saying.
bro means I agree with your point.
And then
So-
my issue, just to let you know, just so you understand where I was coming from, is FSA is like state and SAT and SAT was national. So I didn't think that maybe there's a different interpretation of what standards were, you know what I mean? Because FSA, obviously the state of Florida thought it was good enough for everyone here, and is that good enough? So I was just trying to volunteer another possible
But not
benchmark
of
to
all,
look
no,
at, which
our
is
kids
national
graduate
standards.
without passing the FSA also, right? So if you go to a recovery class, this is the reality, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. Let's say that you're not gonna pass that algebra class, right? You're not gonna pass the FSA, but you can pass one of the other scores, you go to the credit recovery program, you get a high enough grade in that credit recovery program. No, so you can't do that.
The test requirements are required. The only thing a student can achieve in a credit recovery program
The credit,
is earning the credit.
right?
That does not exempt them from the state testing benchmarks for graduation purposes. That only gets them to their 24 credits in the required courses, or it gets them to a 2.0 GPA if perhaps somewhere down the line they had a failing grade that they need to make up and they maybe got the credit for a D, but they want to do grade forgiveness, so they don't need the credit, but they need a GPA. So there are 3 benchmarks that students must meet for graduation. 24 credits or 18, there's another option, but most people do 24, a 2.0 overall GPA, unweighted, and the testing requirements for ELA and math.
So let me ask the most basic question and then if it's 406, I'll drop it. Are all diplomas equal in Osceola County? And that's just yes or no, give me the most basic yes or no.
No, you can't,
Why? They should be, that's the impression.
No, you have ESC.
Hold on, my discussion is with Dr.
No,
Hayes.
No, but I can answer that.
Hold on,
You have
but I
ESC.
don't want your answer.
The answer
I
is
want
no,
Dr.
because
Pace
you
to
have
answer.
ESC
Okay.
diplomas as well.
But I want Dr. Pace to answer it, she's the superintendent. So my question is simply, are all diplomas, do they mean the same? The fact that it brings up this level of discussion gives me the impression that it's not. But the community, like we're talking about, right, their expectation that my diploma, that my child got is the same as any other child in Osceola County. If that's not the case, so I'm not saying that we need to report that we're doing a bad job. I'm saying that we need to report the actual fact of education for our parents. I don't want you to graduate my kids, right? But then you don't have to report to me exactly what that means to me and my child's education. I wanna know what my child learned. That's the most important thing to me, right? So but I'll drop it.
Dr. Pace, or did you want Dr. to go first? Do you have a question?
We dropped the issue and we're just going to, I don't need to say anything, it's been dropped.
No more comments?
Thank you again for your engagement in the workshop today. It's been very helpful in helping to provide staff direction. Hopefully, we've been able to share some information that you find helpful as we move forward. I do remind you that we have a short executive session in my conference room before we have our reception for our new teacher graduates who are now proudly working in our schools at 5 o'clock upstairs in the finance conference room.
So first your room and then finance. Thank you. Thank you, board. We'll close the workshop. Thank you guys for coming. Hopefully next year you'll be over there.